So I was going to shoot this video up by one of my favorite places, which is this old abandoned drive-in movie theater up in Hyde Park, New York, historic Hyde Park. But by the time I got up there, it was kind of snowy and sloppy and slushy, and it wasn't cold actually. It was about 50 degrees today, but I don't know, it was slippery, and I didn't want to drop my camera, and I didn't feel like getting my shoes wet, and I'm just so tired of winter already. I am finished. I am so ready for spring. So I figured I would let you see what I saw today, and let you know that generally I would do anything for you, but today I was kind of lazy. So I'm going to take this back to my apartment. I'm going to clean off my table finally, and I'm going to shoot this video at home in my apartment about my father. So, let's try to tell this second story of my Stories in 4K Season 2. And I want to talk about my father and my father's lenses. I have a Minolta Rokkor 50mm f1.4, which was my father's lens. I have a Minolta 28mm f2.8 Telesor lens, also my father's. And I have this Minolta Rokkor 35mm f2.8. That was not my father's lens. So I'm going to take this out of the equation for a minute, and I'll explain that later. I want to talk about why these lenses are so significant for me to use. And it really doesn't make any sense in terms of filmmaking or photography or anything like that. I mean, they're great lenses, there's no question, but they're all manual. They had some issues when I first found out about them, and I had to take them to this guy in Pelham, New York, to make sure that they were in working order, and I had to make a few adjustments, and actually this 35mm was also a mess. But these two were pretty intact. I just had to really get them cleaned. And they were even pretty clean because they had been sitting in a bag for many, many years. So my father was a photographer in World War II. When you get into the Army or the Navy or whatever, they generally would give you a job. So my father became a photographer. And he was one of those guys who was like hanging off of these bomber jets while they were dropping bombs, taking pictures. Like, we have all these pictures of mushroom clouds, and I can't include them in this video because they're locked away in storage somewhere, and I haven't seen them in years, but you could just imagine mushroom clouds in France and Germany and Austria, like World War II. My father was that guy. So he also, I guess became not a professional, but kind of a strong hobbyist of photography. And I could tell a lot of stories about that. I do tell one story in my movie, This Is the End for Me, and so if you want to hear that story, go watch the movie. It's a story about how he wanted to take pictures of me when I was on a football team when I was 5 years old. And if you want to see how that worked out, check out the movie. But I want to tell a story that's a little bit more important to me, in my opinion, because as much as me and my father did not have a very good relationship, and we didn't really get along at all until he was dying, and I got to take care of him at the end of his life. And there's actually a video on YouTube that explains his demise. It was part of my first play called Broke Wide Open, and I talk about what he went through and how nobody should have to go through what he went through when he was dying. It was pretty brutal. But anyway, I had the honor of being able to take care of him at the end of his life. And we made good with all our differences at the end. And I actually got to tell him I love him for the first time in my life the night before he died. So there was a lot of good stuff there. And it actually made me look at death a lot differently. It was the most beautiful time of my relationship with my father. And so suddenly I realized that death is like this beautiful part of life, or it can be. A time where all the bullshit is stripped away and, people just come together and are just much more genuine with each other. Like they got nothing to lose. There's nothing at stake other than the time, the little bit of time that's left to make good on all the things that might have been bad for a very long period of time. Touch my lavalier mic. Purple Panda lavalier. Zoom H1N. So anyway, and I'm shooting with the Panasonic S5, and I'm using the 20-60 kit lens, actually. I'm shooting at 35 millimeters. So anyway, here's what I want to tell you about my father and these lenses. The reason I use these lenses a lot, first of all, they're great lenses, and they happen to be two focal lengths that are perfect for me. And I don't know, maybe it became that way because I used the lenses, but 28 millimeters and 50 millimeters for me, I could shoot everything in my life with those two lenses. I shot an entire movie with those two lenses. So I love those focal lengths. 28 millimeters is wide enough for me, and 50 millimeters is long enough for me and close enough. And they're both flexible. I can actually use them kind of interchangeably for the same kind of shot if I just want like a slightly different vibe. And I've gotten to know these lenses so well that they really have become a very powerful creative tool for me. They're not just a 28 mil and a 50 mil lens. They are more of lenses that create the world in a certain kind of way that I want to look at it, when I make my films. Or I want people to feel things in a certain kind of way. So I feel like I can manipulate that with these lenses. And maybe manipulate is a bad word, but you know what I mean. I can create the world that I want to immerse people in, specifically with these two focal lengths. So what does that have to do with my father, other than they were his lenses? I mean, really very little, except for the fact that my father was somebody, like I'm obviously, if you come to this channel, I think it's pretty clear that I'm a pretty strong social activist and, pretty open about my talking about political issues and social issues and injustice and things like that. And my father was not that way. And in fact, my father was pretty racist when I was growing up. And I would say that that's the main reason that we didn't get along, because I told him that he was racist like every day of his life. I was relentless. I never stopped. It was constant, incessant. I don't know. I just couldn't not speak on it. And I learned such great lessons from being that way. First of all, my father never shut me down. He always allowed me to speak. He always, no matter how much it might have hurt him or pissed him off or whatever, he never told me to shut up. He never walked away from me. He just took it and listened. And if he had something to say, he said it. But generally, he didn't have much to say because it was true. And the other thing was I found him to be a misogynist. I didn't like the way he treated my mother very often. And, he wasn't physically abusive, at least that I know of, and I don't think he was, and I would be shocked. My father was not that kind of guy. But he was disrespectful. My father was a great storyteller, amazing, and a great jokester. He was funny, and people loved him. I mean, he had a gigantic personality, and in that way, he was pretty amazing. I mean, he was beloved. As a matter of fact, when he died, he worked in the garment industry. And he worked in the children's building, which was a pretty famous building in the garment industry. And he was a salesperson. Eventually, he bought in and became a partner of his business. But he was beloved in that business. And when he died, they shut down the children's building on 34th Street and 6th Avenue in Manhattan for the first time in history. For the first time since that building was used for that, for that use, they shut it down. And all the workers, which ironically were people of color, rented 2 buses and went all the way up to Spring Valley, New York to my father's funeral to pay their respects. And I remember talking to one of them and I was like, why'd you guys come all the way up here? And he goes, because your father treated us so well. We loved him. He loved us. Which surprised me, I mean, think about what I just said. That obviously it surprised me. So anyway, one story in particular with regards to my mother is one time we were down in Florida. My parents had bought this little apartment down in Florida, and we used to go there, like, well, I only was there once before my father died. But anyway, we were down there one time, and my father was making jokes at my mother's expense. And he was kind of flirting with this friend of my sister's. And I don't think that was serious flirting, but he was making fucked up jokes about my mother. And my mother was sitting right there. And so, of course, I told him to shut the fuck up. But, I left the room and he continued on and whatever. Well, the next day he flew back to New York, and I had to fly back to New York too because I had a gig that I had to do. And he had to go to work. So I left my mother in Florida. And I think my sister was down there as well with her friends still. And I went to dinner that night with my father. And I don't exactly remember why, but every once in a while, we would get together and go to dinner. Especially as I got, as I was getting into my later 20s. And we did go to sporting events together sometimes. Because when I was young, my grandfather worked at Yankee Stadium as an usher. My father used to take me to Yankee games all the time. Giant games when they played football at Yankee Stadium. We went to Knick games all the time. So I don't want to paint the picture that he was an asshole. He was a good father, and he adopted me. I mean, he saved my life. I could have been in foster care for the rest of my life. I had already been fostered 3 times before I got with my parents, so I was right on the edge of just growing up in the system. So I owe my parents my whole life, my existence. So anyway, we're eating dinner. We're not even eating dinner yet. We drive to this diner. I go up to his house. I drove up to Spring Valley from the city. I was living on 95th Street at the time. My father had a house up in Spring Valley, which is about 25 minutes north of the Tappan Zee Bridge. And we're sitting in the car in front of this diner because I went to his house and then he drove both of us to the diner. And I was really quiet because I was still pissed off from the night before. So my father says to me, "What's up? What's your problem?" I said, "I don't like the way you treat Mom." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "You're making jokes at her expense. They're fucked up. It makes you look like a fucking asshole. It embarrasses her. It makes everybody uncomfortable. But mostly it just makes you seem like you're some kind of a fucking asshole. And she doesn't deserve that. And I don't appreciate it. And nobody appreciates it. So, yeah, just want to let you know. You might think it's funny, but you're making a dickhead of yourself in front of other people and disrespecting her." So my father looked at me, took a deep breath, and he said, "You're right. I'll never do it again." And I will tell you that for the rest of my life, I mean, obviously I can't account for times when I wasn't there, but for the rest of my life, I never saw my father disrespect my mother again, ever. In front of me, at least. And their relationship changed in front of me. So my father listened and really kind of, thought about what I had said to him and considered it and changed. And the other thing that was amazing was I was sitting in a club one night and my friend Lisa was singing in my band with me. Lisa's black. And my father joked with me. He said, "I think you should marry Lisa." Me and your grandmother were talking because my grandmother was sitting there too. And I'm like, "Really? You want me to marry Lisa?" He's like, "She's like your best friend." And my grandmother had said to me, "If whoever you marry, I hope she looks at you the way your friend Lisa looks at you." And we weren't like that, but we were very, very close friends. But I realized that my father was saying that to me because what he was saying was, "You're right. I'm racist. It's disgusting. It's despicable. It's unfair. It's stupid. It's ignorant. It's ugly." And after that conversation, I never saw it again. I never witnessed it again. I never heard it again. It was as if it was gone. And so those 2 moments from my father made me realize that people can change. Because I know a lot of people think nobody can change. Everybody is the way they are and that's it. But I have proof. My father he changed without question. He went from something really bad to something really great. And, you know, he was a complicated man. He was very complex. Everybody loved him. He was the guy. You know, everybody loved him. He was like that New York guy that everybody loved. Even his bookie loved him. You know, the guy who parked his car in the garage. Like, everybody loved my father. We'd walk into a restaurant. Everybody in the restaurant knew my father. Wherever we went in New York City, any borough, everybody knew my father. And I'm so grateful to have known somebody who was willing to change and who taught me so much just from that act. You know, if nothing else, because he didn't really teach me anything else. You know, we didn't have a relationship like that. I don't have, you know, I didn't want to be like my father, quite the opposite. I would have to say that I kind of hated him sometimes. But I always did feel like he saved my life, him and my mom. And what I realize now is he's passed away for many years now. And I still go visit his grave all the time. I learned so much from that man. And so may he rest in peace with the lessons that he taught me. I think about him all the time. When I use these two lenses, I honor him every day and his artistry that, you know, at the time I was in the music business. I had never even touched a camera before in my life, let alone know how to use one. And you know, I can only imagine he would just completely freak out. He didn't even know that I got into filmmaking, that cameras became my life, basically, that we could have had such amazing conversations. I could have asked him advice. He would have been so proud that I was using these lenses. I mean, there were so many times I know he wanted to be proud of me and I wouldn't even let him. But I will tell you just a piece of that story. The night before he died, I was in the hospital with him every day for 3 months when he was dying. And I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but he was laying in the fetal position that night, and I had never seen him lay that way. And all the time that I had been with him while he was sick, I had never seen him lay that way. And I remember I thought to myself, he's going to die tonight. And so, you know, I left the room. I'd always leave at like 1 o'clock in the morning when the hospital would basically throw me out. And I got to the elevator and I stopped. And I turned around because I thought, this is the last time I'm ever going to see my father. Like, I know he's going to die tonight. So I walked back to his room. I opened the door and he's laying there, you know, looking like a baby. He had lost 100 pounds. He had cancer. And he said, "What's up? What's going on?" And I looked at him and I said, "I love you." And he looked back at me and he said to me, "I know." And he died that night, 4 o'clock in the morning. I got a beautiful note from his physical therapist. She sat with him because she said, Leon Wilk definitely did not deserve to die by himself. So I sat and I held his hand to his last breath. So to Leon Wilk, a great man, a flawed human being just like the rest of us, I honor you every day. And this 35 millimeter, I bought on eBay, and I was going back and forth with it, and it actually had a major problem that I had to spend $100 to get it fixed, and it only cost me $75. But the guy who I bought it from on eBay said to me, "Oh my God, I'll refund your money immediately. It was my grandfather's lens. It was really hard for me to let it go. You can send it back if you want, or I'll just pay you back." And when I heard it was his grandfather's lens, I mean, on the one hand, it made me feel good that he acknowledged that, but he didn't tell me that at first, because maybe he thought it would be harder for me to buy it if I'm sentimental, which I am. But it also made me feel good that I have it now, because I will never give this lens away, because it's somebody's grandfather's lens. So I don't really use the 35 as much, even though I do like 35 millimeter focal length, and I'm using it right now with my zoom lens. But my 28 and my 50 Telesor Rokkor vintage lenses, they look beautiful. They're sharp, but they're also perfectly imperfect. They have like that kind of Helios bokeh to both of them. Fast apertures, you know, if I need low light, this f1.4 is crazy. I could see in the dark. f2.8 is as fast as I ever need to go. They cover the focal lengths that I need. And I'm just grateful to be carrying the spirit of my father around with me all the time. Because when I'm not using them, they're always in my bag. And so my father's always with me. And actually, there's a picture of him right here next to the camera. I'll get a shot of it for you with my mom at their wedding. So, pretty cool. So that's Stories in 4K, Episode 2, Season 2. Please subscribe. Please hit the like button. Please consider being a part of my Patreon. And that's it for this particular video right here.